Hola, bon dia, and happy Easter to you. Feliz Pascoa from me, Carl Monson, on the Good Morning Portugal show this morning from expatsportugal.com. Gary Austin, stop it already, rumble in the jungle indeed. What he's referring to is, I think, a very respectful and intelligent discussion about where we're at in the pandemic. COVID-19, of course. We began as a response to the pandemic here on the Good Morning Portugal show, offering a program in English for the expats who are in Portugal to give you advice, guidance, and an update on what was going on. And it's turned into this. And here we are today. And I see in our green room, waiting to join me on screen after I've shared a couple of news updates with you about the pandemic, we have Nurse Peggy. And you'll see exactly what I mean in just a moment. Jenny B's here as well, Andy the Doc Thompson, and of course, Will Thomson, not related. And they'll be joining me for what could be a couple of hours of discussion, but don't let that put you off. Do ask your questions, get clarity about this pandemic situation. Can and how do we return to any sense of normal, and what should we do next collectively? We'll have a leisurely and, as I say, respectful chat about what are the possibilities, what are the ideas, some ideas that you don't hear in the fast pace of the mainstream media, okay? People with all sorts of experience from all aspects of life, epidemiology, science, medicine, holistic health. We have a fantastic panel here this morning. That sounds so ominous, Penny. Good luck. We'll come back to more of your comments in just a moment after I have shared on the screen these news updates, thanks to the Portugal Resident, my favourite news outlet and my favourite writer, as it turns out, Natasha Don here. Couple of things. We've got Portugal's deconfinement with 19 boroughs under warning, 4 in the Algarve. But before we go there, we're going to look at this one. World Health Organization appeals for new restrictions as Portugal prepares for step 2 of deconfinement. It's the deconfinement dance, everybody. Step 2 coming up. The WHO, and people may have something to say about the WHO, has appealed today for further restrictions in Europe to combat the increasing wave of COVID infections, as here in Portugal, government ministers are expected to agree it is safe for the country to move to step 2 of the slow deconfinement process. It's a kind of tango, isn't it? From Monday, a slow tango, is that such a thing? Monday, April the 5th. So we're going into our Easter weekend. I'm wishing you a happy Easter. It's Good Friday today. This will be a very telling and pivotal moment for Portugal, this particular Easter weekend. And you'll remember public holidays from before and what happened with those. Last Easter, of course, and last year's arguably disastrous Christmas. Today's DGS COVID bulletin brings a mixed bag of messages. Numbers in terms of deaths and new infections are up. Incidents, meaning the number of positive infections per 100,000 people, are holding steady at just 62.4 for the mainland. The number of deaths in the last 24 hours was registered as 11. Today's new infections count is 592, and that was published. Always difficult to publish things on the 1st of April, but we'll go with that as the news and the update that came in yesterday. Overall, the country is doing well. The article continues, but that is almost certainly because it is still, to all intents and purposes, hugely restricted. The truth is that next week, with step 2 of this deconfinement underway, there will be more mixing of people, and that suggests the number of infections will increase. Well, of course it will. When people mix, infection occurs, right? But we'll find out more from our panel on that and how they think that will go. Hence, perhaps the wider warning by the WHO, the World Health Organization, which is looking at countries like France and Germany and fearing the Easter weekend will simply make the situations even worse around. So where Portugal was in a poor position at the beginning of the year in January, it now seems in a more favorable position if you compare it to the likes of France and Germany. Portugal's message to the people has been loud and clear. This is the government message. Stay at home, fique em casa, as much as possible. Mix as little as possible. Use all the precautions, masks, physical distancing, increased hand washing. The truth is, however, that many people, this phrase is being a lot in this article. The truth is, let's see if we can find out what that truth is a bit more in just a moment when we bring the panel on. But the truth is, however, that many people have become fed up with the constant state of crisis. Yes, constant state of crisis. It has become the new normal, hasn't it? Let's face it. And our relaxing behaviors, seeing loved ones and getting on with everyday life as best as they possibly can. Okay, so that's the first of the 2 stories I wanted, or articles I wanted to share with you. The next will be the other article about more specifically what is going on in Portugal. Portugal's deconfinement, 19 boroughs under warning, 4 of them being in the Algarve. Let's have a quick look at that, and then we'll start our panel discussion. So, yes, 19 under warning, 4 in the Algarve. April the 5th, here we come. Starts Natasha Don here. Portugal's Prime Minister Antonio Costa has this afternoon, this was yesterday, signalled the off for step 2 of Portugal's slow deconfinement process. 19 boroughs remain under warning, 4 of them in the Algarve. Their numbers far from ideal. The next 2 weeks will be crucial. There's drama, isn't there, in this deconfinement? Said the PM, who seems to have taken the immediate fallout of his snub to Parliament yesterday in his stride. If in the next 2 successive evaluations, the same boroughs remain above the level of risk, deconfinement won't advance in those boroughs. The level of risk has been pegged at a case count of more than 120 per 100,000 inhabitants. That's a figure I'd like to drill into with our panel. Right now, there are 19 boroughs in this situation, 3 of which are in the Algarve towns of Albufeira, Lagoa, and Vila de Bispo. The other, I won't read you all the other counties, but you can, all the boroughs, but you can see those in this news item. According to Mr. Costa, if these boroughs' numbers do not improve in the next 2 weeks, there will be particular measures brought in for them and surrounding boroughs. So that sounds encouraging. It's not as if the whole country is going to be thrown back into lockdown. They're going to take this borough by borough, which sounds to me like a good thing. And just before we turn to our panel, let me tell you what's going to happen in this next stage. But for now, continues Natasha, it's a case of giving populations the benefit of the doubt and letting us be grown-ups and letting further aspects of everyday life start to breathe again. As such, secondary schools will reopen on or around the 5th, as well as their respective ATL, that's the tuition support. Social centres for the disabled will reopen. Day centres, museums, monuments, palaces, art galleries and the like. Shops of up to 200 square metres that have doors to the street, fairs and non-food markets, esplanades, cafes and restaurants, maximum of 4 people per table. So esplanade service can return. I'm looking forward to that. Low-risk sports, whatever that, tiddlywinks, that sort of thing. Outdoor activities involving up to 4 people, plus gymnasiums without group classes, though. So I think that's enough of that for now. Let us bring onto the screen our wonderful panel. Nurse Peggy is here. Andy the Doc Thompson is here. Very fetching and lovely there, Peggy. Jenny B is here, and Will Thomson is here on the screen. Good morning to you all. Happy Easter to you.
Hola, boa sexta-feira Santa, Carl.
Did you?
I looked it up while you were doing the introduction.
So it is boa sexta-feira, is it?
No, it's sexta-feira Santa. So
Oh,
if you say Good Friday, boa sexta-feira Santa.
Fabulous. Okay, well, thank you all so much for being here on this Easter weekend. We're going to have a different kind of chat. Often these conversations are very fast and accusatory and polar. We do it differently, as you know, on the Good Morning Portugal show and in the Expats Portugal community. So that people know who you are, let's begin with a little bit of an introduction. I'll have a sip of tea and start listening now. So if we go to Nurse Peggy first, tell us about yourself and your background and your angle on this from a personal point of view, Peggy.
I started nursing in 1977. I've been a U.S. nationally certified critical care and trauma nurse for 33 years before I retired, and have done a lot of work in the communities and with other infectious disease issues when they've cropped up. And my daughter happens to be a pharmacist who is very active with the COVID testing and the vaccinating right now in the United States. And my feelings are that we all need to be responsible. And I know everybody has a feeling about the vaccine, and I can understand that, but wearing a mask and social distancing and washing your hands, it should be not something that's controversial, because it's shown, if you just look at the United States, where all the states have as soon as their numbers started getting better, the next day everybody lifted their mask mandates, and now the numbers are way back up. It's shown that it works. It's not the government restraining you. It's not forever. It's not anything different than wearing your seatbelt or minding the speed limit. It's doing something to protect yourself and those around you.
Thank you very much, Peggy. And then we'll get more from you on your, what I'm calling the pandemic prescription, because what we're talking about this morning, two key things, just to remind everybody, can and how on earth can we return to any sort of normal? That's the first part of it. And then what should we do next? Because I think, everyone's got an opinion on this, but it takes brave people to actually make a claim as to what we should practically do next, in actual next steps. So we will do that this morning. You mentioned your daughter's a pharmacist. Let's talk to a former pharmacist. We have Jenny B, who'd normally be here. This is her slot, and she's very kindly allowed us to take over her slot for this panel discussion this morning. Morning, Jenny B of Holly Healthy. How are you?
Morning, people. I am good as always.
Excellent. Tell us about yourself for people who aren't familiar with you, Jenny.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like has been mentioned, I'm an ex-pharmacist. I'm born and raised in Germany, so I was working in the pharmacy in Germany, in public pharmacies for about 10 years. I also worked in hospitals producing chemotherapy, and I changed career and became a psychologist. and that's what I am now. And I think all the experience I had came out to the opinion, of course, I have now. And I agree with Peggy to a certain degree when it comes to the self-protection. But on the other hand, I'm a bit more critical when it comes to let other people decide what's the best for you. So I will share more with this in the prescription part. Generally speaking, I'm thinking that there's always really challenging situations in the world, and this might be a really special one. But nevertheless, every challenge is always a chance, so we should take it as such.
Well said, Jenny. Yeah, I mean, this is an amazing moment I don't know if that's the right word, but this is a very special moment. And again, I don't know if that's the right word, but this is a moment, an outstanding, extraordinary moment in human history for sure. Thank you for that, Jenny. Let's go to Will now. Let me unmute you. I will be muting and unmuting people, not because I'm trying to censor anybody, but just to cut down on background noise occasionally. Will, good morning. Tell us about yourself.
Morning. You can hear me okay?
Absolutely.
All right, good. So I started out as an ecologist after university. I was interested in conservation, but I specialized in epidemiology with animals. But then moved on. I ended up working for the Forestry Commission, surveying trees. But then the IBAC epidemic happened back in England and Scotland. So I ended up coordinating the response for that. And building their database, and then coordinating, like track and trace, but for the tree disease instead of for this. I was in Wuhan when SARS-1 happened in 2003. I was there at the time, so all the masking and the fear that came over the population. So I'd sort of lived through something like this before. I've been in Portugal for 3 years now. And since this all started on day one, I've pretty much consigned myself to being a sort of scientific investigator. So looking at all the different facts and figures. I spend hours every single day looking at all the different experts and independent doctors around the world in all the different subjects, and try to sort of get a better understanding of what's going on and how we can possibly, all the possible solutions that we can bring to the table that will help.
Yep, thanks, Will. And that's why you are a legend in this community as well. Let me take my hat off to you at this point. You are exactly what you said there, a tireless investigator. And if you want to keep up with what Will's saying and his thoughts, you friend him on Facebook because he's prolific in his output. I cut you off there. What else were you going to say? Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Going to mute you up for a moment. You got a little bit of a buzz there in your part of central Portugal. Let's go to the doc now in Leiria. Good morning, Doc. Tell us about yourself.
Good morning, Carl. Okay, so I'm a retired GP. I look a bit young to be retired, but I graduated as a doctor in 1989. And I was a GP through the SARS, the swine flu, the bird flu, the rise and fall of CJD and HIV as public health challenges. I've given vaccinations through people's car windows, done tests through people's car windows in the car park in my surgery, dealt with the physical and psychological effects of those pandemics and epidemics, and the human tragedies that go with them. Later on in my career, I was a coroner, and dealt therefore with death in minute detail, and saw firsthand, I'd seen it firsthand, but firsthand across a wide spectrum of healthcare, how figures can be massaged and policies tweaked, really to suit those in charge locally or nationally. When this started last year, so I've been retired 5 years because I had a stroke, and that's why I'm here in Portugal, because I've been able to get myself out of the rat race. So unlike Will, I've well, because I have a new family, I haven't sat in front of a computer collating everything as Will has, and I probably would have done that if I was on my own. But I have kept pace with what's going on a broad level, and many of the statistics I mistrust, especially when we're trying to compare countries. So the only statistic that I think we can use to compare countries and look at the reality of the effect of the pandemic is the excess death rate, which is difficult to massage. But some of the other statistics within a country, as long as they don't change calculation, which is another trick that that governments use, as long as they don't change the method of calculation, you can use those statistics longitudinally to track what's been happening. I think it's very clear that lockdown and vaccination have both had massive effects on the death rate and on the incidence rate. So I'm a natural skeptic and not naturally pro the government, but I do have to take my hat off to governments when they've done what I've seen to be the right thing well. And I think the Conservative government in the UK has done exceptionally well in terms of the vaccine rollout. And I think the Portuguese government on the whole has done very well in terms of managing the sort of social distancing and the lockdowns that have taken place.
And if you know Doc like I know Doc, it will have taken quite something for him to commend the Conservative government in the UK. So thank you very much for your introduction, Doc. That's everybody's kind of self-penned portraits there. Let's say hello to some of the people who've joined us this morning for the discussion. And you're invited to take part, obviously, through the comments. And if you feel it especially strongly, you could join us on the screen as well. Just send me a message to that effect. From New Zealand, good evening from New Zealand, from Project Frugal. That'll be Vinny and Denise there. Paul and Louise, boa Portugal. That's a really good Portuguese greeting. Thank you. We thoroughly approve of that. If you want to talk Portuguese in here, feel free, but not too sophisticated. Yeah, okay. Go easy on the Portuguese, but we do encourage you at the same time. Sophia's here, shouting out to somebody. I think what Sophia's doing there very kindly is sharing the discussion with other people. Feel free, please, to do that. Good morning to you, Gary Austin. And by way of a bit of love and light relief at the end, possibly, if we need it, we might not need it, but we're going to play and premiere Gary's tree zone video. We're going to go out into nature virtually afterwards, courtesy of Gary Austin, and that's how we'll see the show out after we've had our discussion this morning, which will be beautiful. I think you will love that. It's like a sort of decompression, a natural decompression process. Julia McIntyre's here with a bon dia as well. Yes, good morning to you, Sophia, and thank you for sharing that. Joel is here, who will give us, I'm sure, a uniquely Portuguese and a northern Portuguese to boot perspective on things. He doesn't mince his words. Good luck from Penny Albertella. The Thompson twins are here. Very good. Somebody had to make that joke, didn't they? Both Will and the here. Dave in Ireland. Good morning, Carl. Dave G here from Fire Dave. This is our new normal. I tell you what, if I had to be with these guys on the screen here, this isn't a bad new normal from my point of view. Kiza Solomon, Simo Ook, wow. Good morning to you. TP Larson here from Northern California. Hank, of course, in California as well. Mrs. M's here in the living room with the candlestick. Oh, I see what you did there. Yes, not the lead piping. Candlestick, weapon of choice this morning. Dear to you. Good morning, Carl, and all the panel. It is high time we stop believing in the objectivity of the WHO. I think he's talking about the World Health Organization rather than the popular beat combo. Aman, a nurse that's saying that. Mark Rigby, bon dia from a cloudy Pavor de Vargy. I'm sure, Mark, you'll have something to say and contribute here. Bon dia. Can't wait to drink a mer de lait on the Esplanade on Monday. You're not alone in that, Pamela. We're so grateful of this deconfinement. Should we be? Morning from Sean Maguire. Donna is here as well. Good morning, all. As a retired registered nurse, I'm very interested in today's panel discussion, and we are looking forward to your contributions, Donna, as well, from that point of view. Bear with us, folks, as we go through all of these. To me, everyone's voice is important, and that takes time. Bon dia, Alegria. The news about freedom of movement sounds great. I heard that the area we are in has no cases at the moment. That's over in Castelo Branco, so let's hope it stays that way. A good population density working in your favor there, or a sparse one anyway. Hola, Comrade Andy. From Hank. Guten Tag, Jennifer. Hola, Nurse Peggy. And Willkommen, Will, I think. Well, thank you for those individual greetings for our panelists there, Hank. Love Nurse Peggy's hat. We all do. Pete liking it as well. Rocking that nurse's
hat, Carl.
Cap, did you say? Cap. All right.
Hat.
First point of order. What was on my mind is if I can borrow it sometime, Peggy, but we'll talk about that later. Good point, Peggy, from Jeff. Peter, in Utah, if you're caught not wearing a mask in public, you're fined and taken to a COVID ward. That only takes the infections up, doesn't it? Come on, is that a real thing or an urban myth? Have to say, I think that is a great idea. No, we can't be dragging people into hospital as a punishment. Should be good, Donna, says Jeff. Donna Grassa's here, who I know will also be outspoken in this subject. Bon dia, Ibo Pashkor from Donna Grassa. Me too, I think, agreeing with that came in whilst you were talking, Jenny. Question. We'll come back to the questions after we've heard of the pandemic prescriptions from each of our panelists. But if someone wants to have the vaccine, something to consider here, should individuals be granted access to the vaccine if the EMEA says yes, but the politicians say no? We'll come back to that. We are living through history, says Hank. Yeah, an incredible time to be alive. Agree with you, Jenna. We've got to look for the silver lining, says Sophia there. Wow, so many comments. Thank you, everybody. Denise, what do the annual death rate stats look like in Portugal in relation? So we'll come back to that as well. Bon dia from Moscow, from Caroline this morning. Bon dia from Yorkshire. Harrogate, back to 4 degrees C. Great night last night. Did my best, Peggy, as your wingman for the Algarve. He did. He represented the Algarve very well on your behalf in our discussion last night. Leslie, bon dia, everyone. Let's hope for a brighter future and freedom soon. Love this show, says DJ. Much better than biased mainstream. Always hear many sides of any argument in a balanced way with Carl. I'll do my best. This is a big and emotive issue. I will do my best this morning. Hola, bon dia, Carl and panel. Struggling this morning. Always bad having a second glass of port. It tends to lead to a third. UK beginning to release slowly. R is staying at under 1 at the moment. Good news in from the UK there. Marcus Valbon, bon dia, everyone. Bon dia to all from Claire. Guten Morgen from Germany, from Jim McDonald, who's over there. Carl, Peggy, Andy, Will, and Jenny. Mark Walker's here as well. Bon dia de Cidade de Nova York. Oh, okay, so hello from New York. It's what I'm going to go with. Milda Sorian, bon dia todos. Maria Costa joining late, but happy to see that there is a nurse in the group. Yes, indeed. Yeah, if anything untoward should happen, we are very. We've got a great group of people. Although not sure about vaccines, says DJ. We will address vaccines, of course we will. Good morning from the north coast of Northern Ireland from William Ogilby. Mark Rigby, the doc is right. Excess deaths, the most reliable statistic. Other stats may be useful in a particular context, but politicians and others can either misuse or misinterpret those stats. They wouldn't do that, would they, Mark? We all want the truth, whatever that is. Bon dia from Lisa in Jersey, from a sunny Jersey. Marcus Valbon wishing us a happy Easter. Jones, 227, hi from Oregon. Ian, interesting career, Doc. Agree totally on vaccine rollout in UK. Shame the government didn't lock down earlier, both in March and September. Janine L. Bon dia from Portugal now instead of the Bahamas. Wow. Nice to be able to listen at 9 instead of 4 a.m. We'll come back to more of your comments, including this one. Daryl Owen is, yes, Jeff is sharing, which is great. Please share this discussion with other people. It's going to be a good one. Let's go to those pandemic prescriptions now, starting with you again, Peggy. What practically, logically, realistic should we do? Not necessarily just in Portugal, because this is a world community picture as well, but what should we be doing in these next few months, possibly years?
I think it's going to take years simply because of the lack of cooperation. There are a lot of people that feel like they don't have to do it because they don't want to do it. But there are a lot of things that I don't want to do that I have to do because it's the law, it's the rule, and because it's not just for me, it's for everybody around me. And this is an unprecedented situation. This has gone on for a friggin' year. And it's unfathomable that in our society, with our scientists and our medicine and our ability to isolate things and take care of things and to support patients on ventilators and give them medications, that we have lost in the United States almost 600,000 people just to COVID. And that's in addition to, whoever asked that question, that's in addition to the people that have been lost from regular causes, heart disease and accidents and things like that. Almost 600,000 just to COVID. And the CDC director said that she felt like that we knew after 100,000 what it was that would help stem the flow of deaths. And because we had Bozo the Clown in the White House, we couldn't get things done. He wasn't supportive. And so even though they were working hard on vaccines, nobody really wanted to do the other things that were necessary to try to keep it from spreading. And if that doesn't happen and it just keeps spreading and spreading and spreading, then once the cat's out of the bag, it's hard to get it back in. And I just feel like there's a lot of things in life that we have to do that we might not necessarily want to do. I understand people who don't want to take a vaccine. I want the vaccine. I want my family to have the vaccine, my friends to have the vaccine, and I think it's important. But I understand people who don't want the vaccine, but I don't understand if you can't put on a mask and you say, oh, I can't put on that mask for the hour that I'm in the grocery store. Well, what about the nurses and doctors who are wearing full PPE for 12, 14, 18 hours to try to help stem this flow? And I just feel like everybody needs to take some responsibility and try to help get this under control, because we haven't done a very good job for the last year. So
Okay.
we need to look at what hasn't worked and what has worked.
Okay, so take the medicine in the broadest sense, vaccine, the measures that are required to get it under control, to keep it in check, and keep doing that, and do it, and collectively take responsibility for doing that would be your prescription, as I understand it, Peggy.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Jenny.
It's me, right? Thank you, Peggy. I absolutely respect your opinion, and of course all the experience you had as a nurse and all the things you have seen. But I do have a different opinion in the term of responsibility, like you said. Because I think it's not just the responsibility for you to wear a mask when you're in the grocery store. I think the responsibility goes much further, a bit to what Andy said earlier. It's about, generally speaking, taking on the responsibility for yourself and not blaming the government, your parents, your beloved ones, whatever, for the situation you're in. At the end of the day, every moment, you have the opportunity to choose again. And I'm not so much speaking about to choose whether to wear a mask or not when you go into the grocery store. I fully agree with this is kind of like a social responsibility. And if you don't like to wear the mask when you're in a grocery store, then maybe get a delivery. But on the same hand, I think that is something that falls, from my understanding, to common sense. Because when you have diarrhea, you don't go and use as many public toilets as you possibly can in order to spread what you have. And that's sort of like the same thing with COVID. And for me, it's just another threatful thing out there in the world that can potentially kill you. But there's so many, and they are self-made, most of them. We have air pollution that's killing you. We have all the food and all the toxins in our food. But do you stop eating? No. You try to find the best solution for you, like growing your own food, things like that. So only because there's another threatful virus in this world, if you decide not to visit your Nana for the next 2 years, that's down to you. But then you have to live with the fact that you haven't seen your Nana for the last 2 years because of another thing that's out there. And I really like what Andy was saying in terms of the psychological impact this has on us. Because what many people underestimate is how much your psyche and your mental state has actually an impact on your physical state and on your immune response. So when you take in all these mainstream news every day, all the time, and you just hear COVID, 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 COVID 20,000 times a day, this is stress for the body. And in this stress, you're terrified. And when you're terrified, your immune response is no good at all. So the best thing for us to do, I think, is really think about what can I do? What is like my part where I have impact on? Because I don't have any impact on what the government is doing unless when I go to the election. But despite that, I don't. Of course, I can sit at home and I can moan and I can rage and I can go crazy about it. But what's the point? Nothing's going to happen and change through this, despite I'm in a really, really bad mood and it's not good for my health. So I can also decide to just look at it, but still stay with myself and make the best possible outcome for me out of it. As in, okay, I can't meet all them people now live, but look at this. This would have not been possible if we would have not been in this situation. I'm so pleased to meet all of you people. So I think self-responsibility, and sometimes it's hard. Like I say, it's just like, yeah, just go and do it like this. But I know it's not so easy to change this perspective, because we're all triggered and we're all like in these emotions. Of course, we're afraid for our family, we're afraid for our friends, we're afraid for ourselves. What if I can never go to Bali again? All these things. But at the end of the day, I think it's a great chance to see what's really important in this life. Health is important, of course, I think we 100% agree, but it's not important to have a BMW. It's not important to have a great house. As long as you have a roof on top of your head and your fridge is full, you're more richer than 78% of the world. What's the word? Yeah, of all the people on the world. And that is something I think we should remind ourselves on. And even if it's a global pandemic and a global crisis, I think it's our chance to remind ourselves on how important each and every single life is, but still it's my responsibility if I decide to get a vaccine, if I decide to get absolutely desperate about the situation, it's my decision whether I go out to the grocery store and wear a mask in order to protect myself and others, or I rather stay at home and get the delivery. Because like you say, Peggy, it's at the end of the day, it's all down to you, but we have a social responsibility because we're social beings and we all like to live with each other. But I think it's important, if you're terrified, not to, it's like, the world is like we make it. If you focus on the sad things and on the bad things, then you will live in an absolutely terrifying, horrible, sad, crazy world. But you can also try to focus on the positive side. And then there will always be a chance. There will always be an opportunity. There is no such thing like you're stuck. You never are. That's just that's mindset.
All right, Jenny, thank you very much. So what I'm hearing from you there is a greater sense of self-responsibility, but also to take a slightly different perspective on this. You're bringing in other angles on this, I think, there. And also you're going against that kind of terrified stereotype, of course, where people are saying, okay, we don't want so much government control. If without government control, there's going to be anarchy, but you're advocating self-responsibility, which ultimately could mean a lot more personal freedom and us having to negotiate with each other rather than being controlled or mediated by the government, if I understand you correctly. Excellent. Will, I'm sure you have a pandemic prescription. You've been talking about this for the last year. Go on, mate. We'll have to
He's muted, Carl.
I'm trying. There we go. We've done it.
Is the buzzing still there?
No, it's gone.
Or can you hear me clear?
No, we've cured the buzzing.
This is my first time actually being on a screen with lots of people throughout this whole thing. I've never done this before. All right, I'll start with my sort of stance on various things. And it might sound a little extreme, but for starters, a lot of what people, I believe, have seen when they've been following the television and even reading the papers and so on, there's a whole hidden world of stuff going on that people are simply not aware of, even expert professionals. And okay, I'll start with the vaccines. This may sound a bit of a shock, but I would argue that, say, Peggy, you said 600,000 people died from COVID in America. I would argue that 550,000 of them died because they didn't get the right medicines. When Donald Trump first was talking about things, he talked about hydroxychloroquine, he talked about a disinfectant, he was taking zinc, he was taking vitamin D. And if now we actually know all of those things are highly, highly useful, but all of them have been ignored. And that is almost definitely because of this quest to get vaccines, which are, as you know, highly profitable. For example, vitamin D, all the studies say you can reduce transmission by 36% and ICU by 80%. So if everyone had been told about this, then what a difference that would have made. The hydroxychloroquine, if taken early with zinc, can reduce transmission by 50-60%. So that would have helped to curb the pandemic. But that was always deliberately kept out of the way. They've now got a nasal spray that's coming to market now called Sanitize. And it's basically the natural sort of disinfectant your body creates. Your white cells use it to sort of inject into cells to blow them up. They've now, after taking that material, put it into a spray, and that is completely safe. Spray it into your mouth, and in 72 hours, all the virus is gone. Now, they could have come up with that. We knew all about nitrous. The stuff inside is called nitrous oxide. And we knew about this from the start, and yet it's not been used. And it could have been. And then, of course, the ivermectin, which even Andy, it's either, yeah, Andy, you know about the ivermectin too. You said so yourself. Like there is a mountain of evidence now. There's even a published review paper now showing 90% effective, 90% reduction in transmission. And when you compare all these things, how safe, how fast, how rapidly deployable they are, when you compare that to the numbers for the vaccines are looking to be what, 50% reduction in transmission, up to 30% of people are completely hesitant and don't want to take the vaccine. We still don't know about future effects. So when you compare the two together, if you listen to all the health experts now that are, in government and so on, they're saying this is going to continue despite vaccines. We know it's going to continue with transmission because vaccines in the arm do not protect people in the mucosal membranes. And we knew that all along as well. We've never been able to stop a respiratory virus with vaccines. And although they said if we get one vaccine, we'll reach herd immunity, and then they said, 2, now they're saying, 3. You can see where this is going. It's not really going to end unless we adopt other medicines, other therapies and strategies that can literally stop this overnight. Sadly, it's not the things that people hear about in the newspapers and the TV and the reports. I had 3 medical staff, sort of health and social well-being staff, come to visit me 2 days ago, and they didn't know anything about vitamins. They didn't know about ivermectin. They hadn't even heard of it. And I'm just really sad. There is a distinct lack of information that has got to frontline doctors and to health professionals. So that's how my prescription would be. We need to find a way to get that sort of information to doctors and nurses, because they're not getting the information from their managers and they're not getting it from the news. You really have to go and find this information for yourself. Otherwise, people just believe the only solution is more and more and more vaccines. And then the masks. We'll go over masks one more time. The amount of the socio-economic damage that's happened. I heard Andy, you were talking the other day, the job losses, the sort of the trauma of being in isolation. There are a lot of people who are very much against this forced mask idea. And when you look at all the statistics, it seems overall to only have an impact of around 2 to 3% on reducing transmission rates. But on the other side, there's also a lot of sort of traumatization. I've just seen a report, they're finding formaldehyde on these disposable masks. The Chinese are making them all, and they're not rinsing the chemicals. So it's got formaldehyde, cobalt, something called alanine. And so now looking at how long people have been wearing masks, sometimes it's not just, an hour in the supermarket, it's all day at school, for example. And so there is real concern about the actual damage that could be done. And I would say, again, there are alternatives. And when you consider the numbers and how they change when it comes to lockdown, I don't think most of what these numbers say is not so much the lockdown, it's people are looking at. It's not how many times you wash your hands, it's sort of how much you limit your close contact with people. And in respect to that, the most sort of revelationary thing I could say is actually being outside, but with few people in the open air is much, much safer than being inside a room, no matter how many masks you wear. And I would argue, like Jenny, that is in people's individual choices, what they do with sort of restrictions. I don't think anyone should be getting fined or getting jailed. I think people will act more responsibly if that sort of, if it's not put on people from the government, but actually, okay, you all know what we're doing now. You all know, you can all sort of, act like adults and make your own choices. I mean, people at the moment are more afraid of being caught by the police than the virus for a lot of people, for being fined or their neighbors shouting at them. And we can't live like this, you know? Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Will. So my summary of that would be that to take a look at the overlooked and underestimated treatments, possibly because there are certain interests driving what have become the more popular cures or treatments, and are part of the more sort of mainstream narrative. You know, we're being sucked into that at the exclusion of other things that might be helpful. Okay, thanks, Will. Loads of great comments. We'll come back to those after we've heard from the doc on a pandemic prescription. You've issued a few of these in your time, prescriptions, I suspect. What's yours for this particular world situation that we've got?
So so I'm going to engage a little with what both Jenny and Will have said, and I think, and I agree with much of what you both say, but when I'm interacting with what you said, it's on a multi-axis basis, because, for example, I 100% agree with what Jenny's saying about personal responsibility. It's absolutely vital that we take responsibility for how we act personally and socially, but actually also politically, because one of the things I think was so sad, and I understand it, and it's very easy to be cynical about the political process. One of the things I thought was so sad was that Jenny said, I can't influence what government does. And that absolutely isn't right, because governments do respond to public pressure. But public pressure is only the sum of individual actions. And if we all sit back and say the government is in control and we can't do anything to change the government, then that will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it is absolutely vital that we pressure our political representatives in order to ensure that the governments take the right steps, but at the same time take the right steps ourselves. That's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I'd like to do is talk to some of what Will said. Yeah, absolutely. Vitamin D, ivermectin. I'm not so sure about hydroxychloroquine, not its beneficial effects, but its risks in terms of bone marrow suppression, etc. I've prescribed hydroxychloroquine myself, obviously, as a doctor, but we were very careful about warning people about the risks of bone marrow suppression and other side effects. So I sound a very loud note of caution as far as that's concerned. And 100% I agree with you about the profit-driven motive, which has I won't say suppress the information, although there may well be suppression, but certainly has weighted the discussion towards more profitable solutions rather than looking for the easy stuff. I mean, vitamin D is a case in point. It really is. The number of people of color in northern countries, so I would take that as sort of the middle of France upwards, who absolutely have to take vitamin D supplementation because their skin filters out the ultraviolet light that is needed to create vitamin D in our bodies. But the proportion of those communities who do not know that they should be taking vitamin D on a regular basis is astonishing, considering that 20 years ago as a GP, I was routinely measuring vitamin D levels in Black people to encourage them and show them why they should be taking vitamin D. So there's no importance placed on this because vitamin D is a very cheap medication, and therefore, there's no from the neoliberal capitalist perspective, there is no need to push its use because it's going to make nothing for the shareholders. So what we need to do, and the other thing, I agree. I understand what you're saying about the vaccines. Vaccines absolutely work against flu viruses. They very clearly work against flu pandemics. They are clearly working. I can't agree with the idea that the reduction in the UK, the sudden massive reduction in the UK, is not related to the rollout of the vaccine. When you look at what is happening with the virus across the rest of Europe, where we are seeing increasing numbers, whereas in the UK we are seeing decreasing numbers, and the only real difference is the rollout of the vaccine. So I have to say that even though it's a profit-driven, I still back the use of the vaccine. But what we have to do is remove strictly suppress the profit drive. The idea that a vaccine producer or the pharmaceutical company that's actually developed the vaccine can say we cannot fulfill our contracts because too many people have placed orders, but we're not going to allow the pharmaceutical company down the road to produce that vaccine because we want to protect our intellectual property, is absolutely obscene.
Yep.
And so what we need to do as part of our political responsibility is to start understanding how we can change that system so that we have a socially owned pharmaceutical industry in terms of the production, even if I would be reasonably comfortable with having contracted research and development, which would be publicly funded. We cannot allow companies to say, yeah, we know, even if Will's right and vaccines aren't effective, and I don't think that's the case, but even if you were right and vaccines weren't effective, for a company on the one hand to say we've just produced this fantastic treatment, but no, we're not going to let you have it because we're not going to allow this company down the road to produce it, is obscene.
That's not socially responsible, is it?
No. So my prescription is more individual social responsibility, more individual political responsibility, governments actually cooperating and getting control of the rabid private sector, and absolutely a lot of emphasis on the cheaper things like vitamin D, etc., which could make a huge impact. I don't think any one solution in pharmaceutically is going to be right. We're going to need a range altogether, which will suppress the virus.
A holistic approach, you might say. Thank you very much, Doc. Appreciate that. Panelists, take a rest. Peggy's very wisely brought a flask and some sandwiches, I think, because we are going to be here for a while. Let's go to some comments. Milda's loving the cap and says nurses rock. Maria, I'm watching protests in Canada where they're entering a new lockdown. I have very mixed feelings about this, as I'm not feeling fooled or tricked by the government in any way. I prefer to err on the side of caution. A question there, Maria, of course, I think that we might all address is, but for how long? You know, how long could you put up with that? I saw, Elf, the movie, you see those memes, and there was one this morning. Only 3 more lockdowns till Christmas. Can we put up with that? Or how much longer could you prefer to err on the side of caution? So grateful. Julius says that Portugal has taken social distancing seriously, and it has been hard for Portuguese people who love to hug and be close. Came from the US. Fights over masks, ridiculous claims of personal freedom with no thought for consideration of public health. I guess that's the land of the free is one definition of freedom there, isn't it? Freedom to do what the hell you like. In Sweden, there are only recommendations, no consequences. So people do what they want. Very interesting, the Swedish example or the Swedish model. I'm sure that will come up in further discussion here. Our numbers in California are looking fantastic, says Hank. Glad to hear it, Hank. Jab or not to jab, says Paul. The UK had the worst record early start of the pandemic. 31 million jabs later, the figures speak for themselves. Deaths down to average 50 per day and falling. The vaccine works. I think testing and reporting also comes into that, though, Paul, without wanting to sound too cynical, but I'll let our panelists pick that up and others here. I just checked European COVID numbers per 100,000. Finland had the least, says Susan from Finland. Finns socially distanced normally. So do Brits, actually. They don't care for small talk either, yet they'll go naked into a sauna with strangers. Go figure. It is odd to me, but payoff is in small infection numbers. A very interesting portrait of Finnish life there. Hello from Porto. Feliz Pascual from John Richardson. Good morning to you, John. Lisa Jennings is here. Bon dia from Jakarta this morning. How do you all feel about a requirement to have a digital health passport? We will definitely talk about that, to be vaccinated, to be able to travel. Lisa thinks it's a good idea. Paul Williams, as something who contracted, or probably someone who contracted COVID due to the Christmas relaxation, along with 12 others at a restaurant. Let's hope we do not make the same mistake again. So, yeah, Paul, guilty as charged, confessing to that, and probably once infected, twice shy or something there. Paul, tell us more. Bon dia, Todos. Got my second Moderna vaccine. The side effects this time were brutal, but well worth it to be closer to the end of the tunnel and feel safer to move to Portugal. Thank you, Doreen. Debbie Dews is here. But hello, everyone. Happy Easter. Great to see so many people on the show. Thank you, Debbie. You do what's right because it's right, not because it's easy. Well said, Hank, says Ian. Maria, I've already told my friends and family that intend to visit me and stay with me in Portugal. So a vaccine passport on a domestic level there at the Costa household. And of course, it's your house. You absolutely, have the right to do as you wish there. I think that is a kind of level of personal responsibility mixed with the social contract, isn't it, of your family? The vaccine is an experiment, and some might say no, of course. The vaccine is an experimental medical procedure, says Aman. It should not be coerced on people, and look at the ethical record of these pharmaceutical companies. I wouldn't trust them to look after a whippet. Okay, you don't sound like a Yorkshireman there, but who knows? The virus is not going away. Vaccination will help with control and management at the population level. Masks are around for a very long time to come, says Mark. Social distancing is likely to be a more problematic issue. Variants such as the Brazilian are disconcerting as more infectious and more deadly. Booster vaccines will be needed to address that. That's also something I think we should talk about. William Ogilby, I respect others' choice, but don't force your choice on me. COVID has a 98.7 recovery rate. No vaccine for me. I trust my immune system. I would be very interested to hear what you think about that sentiment, which is not an uncommon one. I agree with Jennifer, says Maxine. Hi, folks. Are you in lockdown in Portugal? We are, Paul. To be fair, this probably wouldn't be happening if we weren't. I wouldn't be able to get these great people. They'd be out and about doing stuff, but they're here with me this morning. I'm glad to say on Good Friday. I agree with Jennifer, says Emma. Yes, we are, says John. Not sure. I'm sorry, these comments are quite old now. Lots of folks complaining about headaches, migraine, post-vaccine. But is that due to stress around the bombardment of COVID info and stress over getting vaccinated? Says Donna. Totally agree, says Debbie, with my friend Jenny. Bigger perspective, impact on mind and body. Paul, I meant to add strict 5-kilometer lockdown, like here in Ireland. That's Paul's recommendation, I think. Agree with you, Jennifer Marcos. Jennifer from Maria, you're talking about mindfulness, which I agree with, but allowing individuals to take these serious decisions like not vaccinating, I'm not sure I agree with that. We'll definitely be talking about that, won't we? Whether it's, we uphold the right for you not to be vaccinated. without fear of prejudice as well. I don't watch mainstream media, says Denise. It creates fear. I don't think that this virus should be feared, especially if you are healthy and have a good immune system. Is that true? Coming back to that, Aman, well said. Be aware of your blessings and keep smiling. Life is good, a gift and an opportunity. It's good to be alive. That's a thank you, Aman, for that. We should remember that, should we not? We as is the case now, and in this time, this modern world, we didn't start with a prayer or an acknowledgement of the beauty and sanctity of life, which we could have done. But thank you for bringing that in at this point, Aman. Ian, the vaccine provides a high level of immunity to the virus, so you are far less likely to A, suffer, and B, pass on the disease. Having the vaccine is therefore socially responsible. As are other things that we don't do, I think, Ian. Jennifer Barraccu is speaking truth to me again with a heart from the Rock and Roll Cook. Jenny, what a fantastic answer to Peg's comments on vaccines. The vaccine companies admit that the vaccines don't prevent infection or transmission. They just reduce symptoms. Jacqueline, raise our vibrations and be grateful for what we have. Personally, I've learned a lot about myself during this time. For me, it's about perspective. Julia, personal responsibility is limited. Many people on the planet don't have the access to good food, don't have a choice. When you speak from a position of privilege is an extremely narrow perspective. One more for the time being, and I know there are loads more to get through, but I'm sure our panel want to respond to some of these. Fully agree with you, Jenny. All the rubbish pumped into our food chain by the big chemical companies has led to such poor health. Overeating, smoking, drinking all contribute to excess death. Obesity and poor immune systems are a big factor in how many people have succumbed to COVID. Personal responsibility starts with looking after your own health. I have chosen not to be vaccinated and focus even more on boosting my own immune system and have upped my vitamin D and zinc. Also, she tells us more of her own pandemic prescription there. There must be things in their panel that you've heard that you want to respond to. Anybody want to shout out? Andy?
Yeah. Okay, a couple of things. If you're having to choose between feeding yourself and your children, you can't afford supplements. So, yes, it's nice for those of us, those upper or those middle class people who can afford to do this. But actually, in order to ensure that those most likely to contract COVID, and those are those in overcrowded housing, they're those who have to keep on working in close proximity, for those people, and therefore for the majority, and therefore for everyone by default, there should be free supplements to ensure that vitamin D is easily accessible, that zinc is easily accessible. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is this idea that if I'm healthy and I've got a good immune system and I'm fit, the COVID's not going to be a problem. There's one case that I can point you to. You look at the husband of that Good Morning Britain presenter, what's the name? Derek someone. He used to work as a political advisor in the Labour Party. He's still in hospital. I think more than a year now, having contracted COVID. They don't know what his level of functioning is going to be when he comes back. This is an extreme case, but this guy was physically fit. He was never ill. Yeah. And there are a number of cases like that of young people who have died, who have been ostensibly healthy and fit with a good immune system. So don't go around blasé thinking I'm okay. You do not know. And you should do everything you can to ensure A, that you don't contract COVID, and B, that if you're carrying it asymptomatically, you're not spreading it. Whether it's to fit healthy people or old people in a care home.
Thank you, Doc. Jenny? Oh, have I? Sorry.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, all good. I just had to unmute. I agree partly with you there. I absolutely agree with the fact what you've been saying, that it's rather speaking about the privileged people, that they are more rather to be likely to get it than ones who live like lucky us, partly in the middle of the countryside in Portugal, where even just by being outside and breathing the air, our immune system is getting much more stabilized than inhaling all the air pollution in a city. Of course, that's one big thing. Then something has been said before. You've been mentioning the pressure on the political side, which I agree. Of course, we do have that impact through election and all this, but what's also important, and I think Will picked it up, is that so much of the pharmaceutical industry and other lobbies have their foot in the politics.
Yes.
So it's been a long time ago since politics were actually pro-people and not the economics were actually controlling the politics.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's, for me personally, I think the energy I would personally put in to make a change in the politics, I rather invest in my own health for me to be ready, when shit hits the fan, let's speak it. And with the supplements, what you've been saying there, I only partly agree with, but that's because I'm a pharmacist and I know that at the end of the day, nature provides the best supplement and no tablets. But of course, I understand if there's nothing and there's no good food and everything, you rather take a vitamin D tablet than nothing. I understand and I fully agree with this. And now what Will has been saying with the things of that there's other stuff that you can actually use in order to boost your immune system, and you would not particularly need a vaccination because that is just suppressing the symptoms. That is also, I agree with this as well. But again, you put it into a pill or whatever, the responsibility for your own health. So, you can do that. But again, you give the responsibility away. Of course, not all of us have come with a well-equipped, functioning body, but we might have all have been at one stage, and there is a reason why it's not. And I think this goes exactly down to Peggy when Will was saying, we will all behave and then it will get all better. And Peggy was clearly saying, no, we won't. And she's right, because this whole crisis is not just going on for a year. This is basically from my perspective, it's the result what we get as the mistreatment us as humans have done to this planet. And that's just the aftermath of it all. And now it's down to us again to decide whether we want to continue like this, cutting down all the trees, putting up all those industries. I will. We changed perspective, literally now.
Yes, he's actually literally bringing a new angle on things there.
New angle.
We can see you, Will, and I'm sure we can certainly hear you when we come to you next. So yeah, go on, Jenny. So I mean, what I'm thinking is that we what the COVID's done, because all the things you've said were pre-existing conditions, to use a bit of COVID terminology there. And what the pandemic has done has just exacerbated, magnified or amplified them. They were problems that humanity had, and they've been brought into sharp focus in these unprecedented times for us to actually do something about now, right? Is that partly what you're saying here, Jenny?
Yeah, absolutely, Carl. That's what I'm trying to say. And like what Peggy said, it was so I could cuddle and kiss you all day, Peggy. You're just so cute.
Get back.
But I can't. It's COVID anyway, huh?
So
but I would.
I'm sure
anyway.
You would negotiate that as a social contract. I'm sure you two. Now,
Yeah,
Will, Will's tongue might be shredded now. The amount he's having to bite it, I suspect. Will, you have a few responses here from what you've heard.
Unmute him, Carl.
Okay, that's a good idea. You're through, Will. Not you're through in that sense. You're live, is what I mean. Americans, we've lost him. What a terrible! there was his moment, and we haven't got a good enough connection. I don't think. Will, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Carl, get him to phone in if he can.
I think that might be a thing to do, mightn't it? I'm going to put the phone number in the comments, Will. I think you might have me on speed dial. I don't know. And hopefully this is the right number and not a Chinese takeaway in Coimbra. So that's in the chat now for you to use, Will, and it might be easier as the doc says to come through on the phone. Solution focused. That's what we like. We have to, I think, address this thing about Jenny. Go on. Sorry, what did you want to say?
I wasn't finished, but thanks anyway.
No, sorry. Carry on. This is a respectful and leisurely discussion, but I didn't pick up on the social cue there that you hadn't finished. So go on. So
I loved what Peggy was saying in terms of it will all get better, and people not wanting to do anything for it except taking the vaccine. And this is such a great example for how our world and humanity is ruling at the moment in terms of healthcare. You are okay if you would have to take the supplements or to take the vaccine, but taking self-responsibility and actually check whether smoking is good for me or whatever, all these billion things, junk food, all these things we're doing, binge watching, binge eating, binge drinking, all this stuff we're trying to distract ourselves from us. We keep on doing, then we can get all the vaccinations and take all the supplements in the world, but this is not going to end. Because the root cause of itself didn't end. And this is, again, like, keep on putting little straps of duct tape on your flashing oil lamp in your car. But I'm telling you, the engine is going to be killed at some point. You can stick on those tapes on it. So that's what I wanted to finish off. What I thought it was really important, what Peggy said there, that the willingness of us as human beings is still so limited. Even the crisis is so big. Like, what else do you need in order to get your ass moving?
It's a good question. Okay, thank you, Jenny. Thank you very much. I think I'm officially overwhelmed by comments. I'm not going to get to everything, so I'm going to do my best to summarize what's there. Thank you, everybody, though, for making your comments. And we're kind of working through this. That's the sense I get. You know, people are listening to each other here. This is unprecedented. I don't hear many pandemic or COVID debates where people are allowed to speak, be heard, and other people are respectfully processing what they have to say. So I take my hat off, take my nurse's cap off if I had one, off to you, and thank you very much for being so grown up about this, everybody. Doc, before we come to vaccine passports, yes or no, as a kind of talking point, what did you want to add there, Doc?
Very briefly, what I wanted to add was the ridiculous focus on treatment generally in healthcare systems over the last 40 years, and the negligent way in which prevention has been treated within the healthcare economy. Because I recall in the 90s, I was on a board of a primary care group, which was the new health authority at the time. And we were desperately trying to spend money on promotion. And the problem with health promotion, which is really sort of about teaching people how to look after themselves, doing the stuff that Jenny's talking about, the problem is that it takes a huge length of time to start showing effects. If you're going to, on a population basis, so if you're going to improve the population's health by getting them to exercise more, by getting them to stop smoking, by getting them to moderate their use of alcohol and drugs, et cetera, by making sure they have a good diet, even should they be able to afford one. It's still going to take 10, 20, maybe 30 years for significant changes in the population's health, particularly in terms of diabetes and heart disease and cancer, which are the three main targets of those public health awareness campaigns. And you have to spend a huge amount of money, and at the same time you still have to treat the diseases that are coming up that happen because you didn't do this 30 years ago.
But Andy,
well, sorry, Jenny. So we absolutely need to focus much more resources on education, health education, on prevention, so that in the future, our children, our grandchildren don't have to spend so many resources on the treatment. And I think that's what you were saying, Jenny, about this being the latest culmination of our failure to try and adopt healthy ways of living.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say I fully agree with you, but still I don't think it should hold us back to start now. At least then in 30 years we got this. And what you said with the promotion of it, and I from both perspectives, I remember I reached out to my professor of psychology in Germany when I was having the plan, which I still have, to develop a program for kids in order to teach them self-responsibility and the whole lot. Because I think as well, if we start now to teach them, these children, then this will be their core values. And about 2-3 generations, they will have passed it on as the core values to their children and blah, blah, blah. I don't think I need to go more in detail. I think you can all understand. But that's exactly the thing. Like, even let's say us, I'm not a parent, but generally speaking, our generation now, because we don't have the tools in order to handle this sufficiently, we can't give them to our kids, obviously. But I'm thinking exactly what you've been saying, like the heritage we leave them, it's disastrous. Yeah. And if we are aware of that, we should at least give them the tools to dig themselves out of the shit we're leaving them. Yeah. And that is one big thing, the prevention. It's just not being promoted by the pharmaceuticals and the health system, because there has never been really interested in your health. There has just been interested in the profit. It's been making you. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Will, because we lost you for a moment, Will. I'm sure you've got much to respond to here. Or with. Oh, we've just got a still life of Will. Will the still. Oh, no, he's here now. Okay. Peggy, you're right there. You're having a little snooze for a minute.
It's the lights.
Overwhelming. Well, I can understand that. People are asking about
that lovely drug that Will is so happy to talk about. Curing COVID caused macular degeneration in my eyes.
Oh,
so
okay.
I have the light so that you can see me on, but I have to keep closing my eyes or tilt my head or getting my glasses just right because of the glare, because of that. So yeah,
people were worried about you in the comments. That's good. So we know what's going on there. Will, have we got a good connection with you now?
I could probably turn the lights off and you can see me in the dark. That might be better.
Oh, he is unmuted, but we can't hear him, unfortunately. What a shame. Will, can you sort your mic out? Because we can't hear you, mate. Or ring me. The number.
Phone in.
Call me with your Portuguese phone, just man to man, phone to phone. Okay. And I'll put it in the comments one more time. So let's talk about this issue that's very current. We're talking about tactics. We're talking about strategy. We're talking about practicality.
Hold on, Carl. What's Will holding up?
Look at this. In the age of the white heat of technology, we're having pen-written messages. What does that say? A ransom note. I can't read. Sorry. Give us a ring, mate. We will. And this is opening myself up to all sorts of possible calls. But there is my number again. Will, give me a buzz.
I can't do that again, Jenny. My hat will go this way and that.
We will stand by for a phone call from you. Doc, people want your contact details. May I put your Facebook link in the
comments? The best, because I don't even look at Facebook much, only when I have anything particular. You can put my phone number if I don't, but I tend not to answer phone calls, but you can use WhatsApp. So use my phone number for WhatsApp, or you can give them my email. You can put both that and my email address in.
I think email address is going to be safer. Could you shout that out for me?
AndyDoc1. So AndyDoc1 at gmail.com.
Well, that's nice and easy. Okay. So yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch with the doc, there in the comments just now is his email address. Right, folks. One strategy being put forward at the moment. We are talking about what we should do next, the pandemic prescription. Some people want vaccine passports. What do we think of that? Peggy, what's your view on vaccine passports? Should they be required for pubs, let alone international travel?
I just don't think there's any way to monitor a vaccine passport. I mean, It would be impossible.
All right, good. Sorry, my phone just seemed to have gone through some sort of spyware attack just then. It froze up, and then it locked up, and then I had to reset it, and now it's just...
Okay, I'm worried about my hair right now.
We've got old school. While Peggy's doing hair and makeup, we've got you with a stable connection. Stay where you are. Don't move, Will. We can hear you now. Go on, Peggy. Okay. Sorry, vaccination passports.
There's just no way to monitor it. And you can't make everybody have a vaccine because some people have bad reactions to vaccines. And so there's a certain percentage of people that aren't going to get the vaccine. What are you going to do with them? And how are you going to keep the bad guys from reproducing the vaccines and selling them on the internet? There's just it's just fraught with issues, and it's not the solution. It's one of the pathways to controlling COVID, but it's not the only solution.
Okay, so do I take from that you're not against the idea of a vaccine passport, but it's not going to be very practical to do it anyway, and it's only part of a bigger picture?
I just don't think it's worth the time and effort.
Okay, all right. That's a very practical response, and I think you're right, because people will start to, if we've been in this for a year and people are thinking, actually, this is going to go on for another year, maybe more, people are going to start printing vaccine passports and all sorts of underground.
It might be a way for Jenny and I to make a little extra dough, but
Okay, she's drawing you into that as a suspect already, Jenny. What do you think about vaccine passports and having to prove that you've had the vaccine, even that people are suggesting you should have it? They're saying you should have that put in your body and it not be your choice.
Yeah, that's like, I remember my parents used to say to me when I was a kid, so if everybody's jumping from the bridge, would you jump as well? And I think this is very, very a good example for the situation we have at the moment, because I think this is another factor in the debate for yourself of getting the vaccine or not, is this, oh yeah, but everybody around me is getting it, so I must need it. And even my mom started like, Jen, I'm going to get this vaccine, otherwise I can never come to Portugal again. And I'm like, Mom, are you mental? No, don't get this vaccine. Like, first, maybe we just wait another 2 years. Second, I can come around or whatever. But like Peggy said, it's an idea, but I don't think it's a very practical idea. And at the end of the day, it just makes sure that the pharmaceuticals will sell as much as possible of the cocktail they've just been creating in half a year, just like that. Magic. And also, I mean, for me, it's so ridiculous because like business people are still allowed to travel without COVID vaccine then because they're business people. And my sister recently started a job where she's basically walking from door to door selling Hoovers, and that's allowed. She can go from door to door and sell Hoovers, but I can't meet with my neighbor and my friend. Honestly. And this is, for me, the point where I think politics just pushed it a little bit too far. You know what I mean? It's like the logic is completely missing. And even they might be overwhelmed with handling the situation, but then at least be honest and say it. So we have a chance. Yeah, Andy, go ahead.
No, hold on. Let's get Will in because we've struggled to have Will.
Yeah.
Is he back?
Will is on the end of the phone, and we have had a request for him to speak as well. So, Will, go on.
Yeah.
What's your view on this?
Thank you. Well, I can't hear one side of the conversation. So I'm going to go back to when Andy was talking about whether the vaccines actually are working as good as everyone thinks they are. Now, in the past, we've never been able to make a vaccine that's injected into the arm that fully protects the mucosal membranes because your body thinks you're getting attacked in the blood and tissue. Flu vaccine is only about 30 to 50%, I think, effective. Now, we know that this vaccine is protecting people's lungs and so on, and their hearts and tissues. But the statistics coming out, the number of outbreaks that have happened after people have had 2 doses, the trials that went on in monkeys at the start, there was no difference in viral load in the throat. And the statistics are on 50, it reduces transmission by 50%. But if we all try to go back to normal, when the transmission rate it's only reduced by 50%, and yet we're all mingling with variants that may be up to have a transmission rate of something like 4 or 5, then we're going to go back to an exponential graph of this still getting about. Except you'll have a lot more people who are, because they're not getting symptoms, but they're still getting infected in the throat, and they don't notice. They essentially might become carriers that don't know. So at that point, what is the point in having a passport that says you're not going to pass it when people who get the vaccine are still going to be likely to pass it? I mean, that's on top of the fact that medical procedures are illegal. They're just not. It's not okay. You were never told. Most people, it was never in the news. People being informed that actually vaccines have not been effective at stopping an infection in the throat. Never been told that. The only reason that news is starting to get out now is because they want to develop a vaccine for the throat. They're saying we might be able to make this one that you sniff, and it creates the vaccine in your lungs or your nose. Because they're admitting now that actually vaccines haven't stopped. So, yeah, you compare the two. The idea of having everyone vaccinated, but the disease still moving around. We're seeing potential immune escape where the fact I don't know if you're aware of Dr. Bosch, the Bosch guy, concerned that a lot of the variants are developing. They're getting more virulent. They're able to escape specific antibodies, and even signs that they're able to suppress more interferon. So if we're not very careful about this, recognize we're using the wrong tools, we are walking into a very, very potentially more dangerous situation than we've even encountered so far.
Yeah, so thanks, Will.
We have to consider this very much on the table, that there are options to stop this very quickly. And indeed, that it's really important that we stop it now, because this situation can rapidly get out of control in a way that most people do not predict. So that's that side. That's in terms of the potential for the virus to become even more deadly. Other thing that is always ignored in this has been the fact that most people were protected with their innate immunity, their white cell immunity, that most of us already had, because we've been exposed to other viruses continually. It's why the kids are so sick. But what's completely missing in the narrative, in the news, and in the research is the fact that there are 4 other common cold coronaviruses which give us that cross-reactivity. This new virus has got 2 different fates, which are very much the same as these old colds that we've got. Currently, as we speak, no one is monitoring them. No one knows where they are. And if it turns out that we're actually not being exposed to them anymore, and the children, over the course of this year, any antibodies we did have that cross-reacted from their mother colds have disappeared or will be at minimal. And now, after a year and a half of this, we're not exposed to other coronaviruses, and even flu. It's going to happen to all respiratory viruses. If we're not mixing somehow in nature with each other in the herd, then we're going to lose all of our natural protection against viruses. And that means we are walking into a dangerous technocratic future where we are forevermore in sterile bubbles dependent on technology to keep us safe from nature, which we've always lived in. And this needs to be addressed very quickly.
Thank you, Will. And this is what you've been saying in these last few weeks. And we've put the link to Will's Facebook site. He goes into much greater depth on his own Facebook page. I mean,
I would implore everyone to go and do some investigation and find out about cross-reactivity from the other 4 coronaviruses, and then start asking the question: why are none of the scientists investigating that? Because when the H1N1 pandemic happened, the vaccine started rolling out. Everyone was told everyone was in danger. And then someone went, hang on a minute, we've got cross-reactivity from other flus. It's not actually hurting anyone. And then they stopped the rollout of the vaccine. So all of a sudden, the same situation seems to be happening again, but it's like all the experts forgot. And it's just baffling. So I ask everyone, go start asking yourself that question. and inquiring if any GPs or any epidemiologists are actually discussing our natural protection, which we don't know about, which is understood in the literature, and yet is not being discussed or put on the table.
Yep. And what seems to be happening here is this kind of, how I described it in conversation last night with some friends is, look over here. And the focus is now on these very polarized specific things, like should we have vaccine passports? And I've been guilty of that myself this morning, whilst loads of other things are being ignored, which could be massively helpful. And that again is a societal, sociological problem we've got, isn't it? This always seems to happen in our big societies, as it were, in the politics such as we have it. It's like, look over here, let's talk about the vaccine. Okay, let's talk about the vaccine, but let's not talk about it at the exclusion of other things. And that's why it's been so great to have a far-ranging discussion this morning. And the problem, of course, with this, as it's going into this vaccine territory, we've had a comment this morning, some people who've had the vaccine should wear one coloured hat, the other people should have a different colour hat. Nail your colours to the mast. Are you with us or are you against us? What? Go on, Will.
I just said there should absolutely be no form of recognition or law or coercion whatsoever. It's up to everyone's choice if they want to get it, and then if they get it because they believe in it and it works, therefore they're safe. And again, any argument that other people have to get it to stop transmission falls flat, because it's not completely stopping transmission. At best, it stops lowering it by 50%.
Yeah.
And if we don't sort out the vitamin D thing, that means your white cell response that backs up your antibody response will be suppressed and increasing, which is going to worsen. Andy said about people not being able to afford supplements, and yet there's no sort of discussion or talk about how we really should. It's time to get out in the sunshine and get free vitamin. What's the journal? The Lancet just published a meta-analysis of vitamin D and said, we tried taking deficient people, giving them 400 units, and like a tiny amount. And it kind of helped, but not very much. And you're like, the best scientists on the planet, or the best journals, are suggesting that it doesn't work, and then they're not even giving enough. I think there's more people at home now know that 400 units is ridiculously low. You need 10 times more.
Yeah.
And yet, apparently, all these medical professional health experts who care about us and want to save our lives are getting it wrong.
Thank you, Will.
Can I answer that briefly regarding the vitamin D? Yes, you can go out in the sunshine if you have sunshine, and if you're not black. I mean, if you seriously, a black person in the northern latitudes is not going to get enough vitamin D to give themselves a reasonable vitamin D level, enough sunshine to give themselves a reasonable vitamin D level. My research in my own practice showed that absolutely clearly. And we used to give 300,000 units as a bolus dose to treat the deficiency, and then I advise 1,000 units a day, and that is a proper vitamin D dose. And it's not, sorry, Will, but it's not every well-meaning doctor who wants to do something about it who gets it wrong. There are many of us who knew what we were doing, and we did that actually that was one public health thing. We got that done across the whole of Birmingham in terms of giving people free supplements and in terms of testing those communities over a period of time. It was shut down due to cost. What cost? It was very cheap, but never mind. We've had people in the chat saying, well, I need 8 vaccines to go to Asia. What's wrong with this one? Well, when you go to Asia, you get 8 vaccines to protect yourself against some pretty awful illnesses. COVID is awful, but actually when it I agree with Will, it's not going to probably or possibly won't stop you getting it. It's way less effective than those vaccines. And it's not, those illnesses are no longer a public health crisis. You're going for your own protection. This is about public policy and social responsibility. And so that's the difference in the argument. I haven't totally made my mind up on vaccine passports, but vaccine passports can happen. Yellow fever. You weren't allowed to travel. I went to Kenya on my honeymoon. I wasn't allowed to go there without a yellow fever injection, but it was my choice to go to Kenya. I either had the vaccine or I didn't go to Kenya. My choice. It cost money. It was expensive. It wasn't available on the National Health Service. But so those just answers to some of the comments that are coming up in the comments. I've got to nip to the bathroom. I'll be back in about 3 minutes, Carl.
All right, fantastic. Let's take you off the screen there, and let's add Peggy in as well. And Jenny, I know, wanted to, or maybe bring a bedpan to that man. No, I'm only kidding. He's gonna make his own way. Jenny, please, I know you wanted to add something to that.
I'm starting to get a bit overloaded because there's so many things, and then me biting the tongue, and then the other things, and then my head is like, whoo.
This is where we're at the moment, isn't it? And I think, what we've had here, that analogy of like the hose pipe in the garden, you turn it on and you let all the water come out. I've not been involved in as far-reaching a discussion as this. So lots of stuff is coming out for people. We can do it again if you guys are willing. Somebody said, we started a conversation here. Can we go deeper? I didn't know how it was going to go this morning. I think there is a... Peggy's not so sure. More coffee. Nurse, more coffee. Bring the screens. IV coffee for Nurse Peggy. But yes, I think, lots is coming out because people have got lots to say, and it isn't necessarily being aired or met or discussed in general conversation. So I do apologize for that collectively, Jenny. But, that's where we're at. Too many comments, too many themes. But let's see what we can do this morning, and let's see maybe if we can regroup and come again at that. So, Jenny, what's foremost in your mind from what you're seeing here?
You see, I think it's beautiful as well that we are so courageous, all of us, because like you say, it's not many times that you actually hear a different opinion. And even with your close friends, you're sometimes already really careful what you're saying because you don't want to lose the friendship. But at the same time, you'd like to openly speak about the things, and it's sometimes not possible. It's tough. I think in this regard, a lot of people start to feeling lost with the feelings they have if they are critical towards it, and the same way the other way around, if they're absolutely following what's been said and what's been necessary, and some might not, and some might criticize this, then there's a lot of doubting about what is true, what is reality, what is the right thing to do. And that's why, again, I can't emphasize this enough, to check in with yourself whether you think this is the right thing for you to do or not. And I'm talking about you personally. And of course, after this, everything else gets taken with in regard, like how do I behave and act in the public? How do I act towards other people? Do I see other people or do I not? Do I have like my miniature circle of friends where we said, okay, we all meet with each other, but make sure after you've met, you not go right to Nana's place. So things like that. But again, I think this is common sense. And if we would not let ourselves bring into the dependency, is that the right word? If we make ourselves dependent on the health system, on the vaccinations, all that. I mean, honestly, guys, this is my physical body. We all have one, and we all know one day this will come to an end. This experience in this physical body will only be limited. But now there's so many things which can limit this life. And I think our perspective from life and death is also quite interesting, because the way we handle death as such an end point in your life and like the most terrible thing this can possibly happen to you. But honestly, even if you think this, why you're not making more out of your life every day? You wake up every morning, you get another 24 hours. What are you making out of it? Ask yourself.
And that could be a good premise for the question, why are we living in fear? Do people not want to hug their grandchildren, grandparents or whatever? Should we be taking more risks now? Can we go on living like this when life is such a gift on the one hand? And as you say, and I agree with you, Jennifer, that, what it's also brought into question is our very notions and fear and all the stuff we've got about death. So along with all the other pre-existing conditions, like the economy, like the way we run politics, like the way we run the world, our view of death itself has been brought into question. And that's been pretty terrifying for people. And it's easier to talk about vaccines and whether other people should have them than it is to talk about death, right? That's an uncomfortable conversation. Will, I know you're there, and I'm sure you want to add more, and you should have your fair share of the mic here. But we could possibly forget about you because you're not on screen. Will, did you want to add something at that point?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Go on.
Okay?
Yeah. Please add.
Yeah, lots to add. I've just been scrolling through the comments there on YouTube, what people have said, and again, this highlights the very lack that a lot, I would say 70% of people are completely not aware of what's being almost like a battle that's been going on in the background for the good science, the truth. People at this point if someone said, why should I take my dog's heartworm tablet as an ivermectin? And that, to me, I'm just like, oh dear, you really don't know. There are thousands of doctors now forming alliances, trying to get the sheer efficacy and safety of it to market, but they're getting blocked by governments, by the World Health Organization, the CDC, and all the media has done is trying to vilify both the hydroxychloroquine and the ivermectin. And in fact, we're slowly getting to the point where more and more doctors realize actually it's brilliant, but most people don't think it's not. They think it's for hairline. And I'm sorry, but they're all just, no one who's gone to actually look. No, even doctors don't know what it is. And it's very, it's indicting of how many people think they know what's going on. And actually, there's a whole world of solutions that's been hidden from people to another world. And I would imagine the kind of people who just watch television probably think the vaccines are super safe and only a few people have died of blood clots. When in fact, if you actually go, you're with other groups where you are opening your channels of information, you'll find out that there are over 3,500 people who died in Europe directly after the vaccine. Mortality rate in the 70-year-old plus in Germany has gone up almost fivefold in the last 2 months. There's all this information that's not being handed when really everyone should be much more aware of all the not only the bad side but also the good solutions as well. And I think that this is again why I say it's so important that any sort of form of coercion or passport really is kind of terrible, especially when you consider that so many of us sacrifice so much of our lives and our freedoms for goodwill to protect the vulnerable on the agreement that the scientists would come up with. And now we're being people who are vaccine hesitant are trying to be forced and coerced and punished, saying that they don't care about other people. And you're like, what was all that stay at home about then? That was us trying to protect people and hunkering down until we could figure out how to beat this thing.
Yeah.
And now we're all aware now of these, like, let's do these things and stop this thing now in spring and within a month. But all the official, the narratives and the bank, if you're listening to television, it says, sorry, we're going to keep doing this for you. And
yes.
that, I'm sorry, when we don't have to be doing that, and indeed, if we continue on this path, it could get much, much, much worse. It's vital everyone starts considering not what they have been told by the newspapers, but actually really start thinking, is what we see really what's going on?
I think someone else is trying to ring me now. How embarrassing is that? And I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
Want to bring your mum in, Carl?
Mum, I've tidied my room. I said, okay. Amazing, Will, and that you make a really good point there about how it's so unfair, isn't it, to start criticizing people who are vaccine hesitant when they have been indoors for a year already, and it really underestimates people, and it seems so unfair to me when we've all been doing our bit, and it's a whole other question, isn't it? We haven't really talked about the economy and what's rolling downhill towards us economically after all of this. And again, we've all done our bit, haven't we? And yet, we will still probably have to face the consequences economically alone and probably without help, whilst we have been collectively taking action to be socially supportive and to look after other people and to ease the burden on hospitals and so on, and to stop infection. So this will continue. I think this conversation. I'm enjoying the comments that are acknowledging that this has been a respectful place for people to air their views, where in other circumstances they may not have been so free to do so. We're into our last kind of 15 minutes of allotted time for this. So what panelists, are there things that I've missed or things in the comments that you've wanted to respond to in this last 15 minutes that we mustn't miss at this stage? And let's not talk too much about specific things, possibly, because we could spend the next 15 minutes talking about whether people should or shouldn't have the vaccine. Is it safe? Is it not? Is it a vaccine? Is it a gene therapy, etc.? Those are debates that can be had elsewhere. What's the real tactical stuff we can talk about, or what have you been inspired to talk about from the comments, Doc?
Respecting your request not to go into specifics, so I won't go into that specific. But the general point I wanted to make, really, that I haven't addressed, Will's addressed it briefly, but is the absolute importance of allowing scientists the freedom to investigate without the stick and carrot of financial incentive. It used to be the case that good scientists were given a lab and assistants and whatever they needed to do their work. Now you can't find a chair that isn't endowed by this pharmaceutical company or that chemical company or that engineering firm. And because they're endowed by those big business interests, they dictate the direction of research, and the real good stuff, the stuff which could help us, not on the cheap, but more cost effectively, and without some of the human costs associated with some of these pretty horrendous technologies. Some of them could be avoided.
Thank you, Doc. Jenny?
Yeah, I was just generally speaking, Will is so right with all the things that he's saying, that they're not getting published, or that people who actually do have a different opinion than the one that is publicly spreaded or scientifically released at the moment. But this is nothing new as well. Like, this has been, like Andy said, that's been going on forever, because there was never been an interest in really healing you. How could you make any money with it? And on the other hand, I completely agree with Andy. Like you said, it would be nice if we would had any science that would be just neutral and would be made in order to spread facts, would be made in order to spread facts and give them people information, which then you can make out whatever you want. Because again, we have 7 billion people, we have 7 billion truthers. There is no such thing like the truth. We all have a different perspective, and that's beautiful. But what I'm trying to say is, thank you, Will, for all this. But I, as a psychologist and as a human being, I see the danger also in the fact about telling people this, because now they might believe in science and then they get skeptical and then they lose their belief in science, but what they're left with is no belief. So I think it's important to give them something which can replace whatever they have been making of the truth from prior to that. And honestly, through humankind's history, it's probably going to repeat itself a couple of times more until we finally killed this planet and us. But generally speaking, there can be science, there can be politics, there can be whatever. At the end of the day, if you have a mirror, you don't even need one. Just look up and down. It's all there. It's already within you. So you might as well appreciate what you have and try to make the best out of it, whatever is on the outside. If it's a pandemic, if it's that your father just died, whatever, these are all things that will happen. Life is a roller coaster, and what you can surely control is how you react and how you decide how you want to deal with it. And I think this is the important bit. We can all do for ourselves and for the society, because when I am less terrified, then people around me are less terrified. It's like a ripple effect. At the moment, and for years and years, we use the ripple effect in the negative way. We do make catastrophes. News is always like terror, 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 bad, 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 negative, negative, careful, careful, danger, danger, danger. That's what news are. But if you think about television, the name already says it. And this is why it's been made, television. There's a piece of paper from the Americans, Will can 100% confirm this. There's a piece of paper from the American government from the 40s that it's saying that television is a great psychological weapon, which is now used to create a moral within society. Yeah? And what happened? It did. And now we're all stupidly following this, but this is not the truth. Go outside and find your own one. And then we can talk again.
Wow, Jenny, thank you very much indeed. Excellent. As we've come to expect from you, this would ordinarily be your slot on a Friday, so you can hear Jenny a couple
Thank you, Jenny.
all of these lovely folks. You'll hear them from time to time on our show here. Peggy, I'm going to come to you now, and I will come to you finally, Will, in just a moment. But Peggy, if I may kind of co-opt you as our collective Arvo grandmotherly figure here, and I want your perspective. I'm talking about elder wisdom here, Peggy. This is a compliment.
Carl.
Yes. Oh, dear,
No, you're a naughty boy.
Yes,
You're
Peggy.
in trouble now, Carl.
It's a
No
compliment.
Easter eggs for you.
Can we kick Carl out?
No, I want. Look, Peggy, you came to me saying you had years and years of experience in ICU. Okay, you've had years and years of experience of people. That's what I'm referring to. You are an elder in that sense, or a would-be elder. Let me put it that way. Okay.
Can we go with experienced?
Let's go with experience then. Okay. What, from that point of view, what are you seeing about human beings here from the conversation we've had this morning? You know I love you, and I'm not disrespecting you in any way there. I'm acknowledging your life experience, and I want you to speak. Okay, this is what I should have said. Sisterly figure. Thank you. Why weren't you there 2 minutes ago, Peggy?
I have seen so much that is just heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking that we can't even be with our loved ones, and I can't grasp in my head 600,000 people dead from this disease. I just can't, because when I was working, if you had a death on your shift, it was extremely traumatizing for you, because you had to be supportive to the family, to the patient, and you were giving medical care, and you were giving mental care, and you were teaching those interns and residents the same. And it was very, very stressful. And I just feel like that we've lost the big picture. Here's the big picture. 600,000 people just in the United States. And that doesn't count all the other countries that we're nitpicking about. Should I wear a mask? Should I social distance? Should I not go see Nana? And that's the forest and the trees. Mm. Here's the forest. The forest is when they are flying over these other countries and there's mass graves, because they don't have the medical care we do, and they don't have the PPE and the things that they can do, and there's just so much of it. I feel like is unnecessary. And I feel helpless because it's my job to help keep people alive.
Yeah.
It's not my job to go in there and work 10, 12 hours and have 6 people die, and myself or the doctor, the only one with them.
Yeah.
It's just heartbreaking. And there's just, I never believed it would go on this long, ever. I thought we would have something that we could do to stem the flow. And if you or Andy or Jenny, if it was your mother or your sister who was in the hospital and there was nobody there with them and they were gasping for breath, if you have ever seen anybody gasping for their last breath, you'll never forget it.
Thank you, Peggy. Well, that's a sobering perspective, and I think we're united in our sense of, and I think what you're saying here is unnecessary death from all these different angles that we've looked at it this morning. Thank you, Peggy. Jenny, quickly before we go to Will, for Will's final comment.
Yeah, just briefly, because Peggy, you keep on talking about these 600,000 people, and oh my God, for every lost being I feel, that's not the point. The point is what I'm trying, I guess, to say with my comment before is, do you believe the numbers? Because who is actually making up these numbers? And how many people a year die of paracetamol? How many people a year, particularly in the United States, how many people a year die of alcohol? But generally speaking, there is no such thing like, if I jump from a bridge, okay, you might have been able to say she died because she jumped from a bridge. But what led me to go onto this bridge, to jump from it, is a whole different story. So I don't think there's such thing like you can say, okay, this was the cause of death. If there's a heart attack, there was a heart attack. But what did lead to the heart attack? So it's so many things. Like now they publishing all these numbers because it's very, very in everybody's mind at the moment. But if you would put any other number of any legal substance out there, it will be shockingly close, and nobody is doubting this. And we never shut down the whole economics because paracetamol is a legal drug you can get over the counter, but it's actually causing death. You know what I mean? Like, it's the relation of the whole thing. I'm not sure. And of course, paracetamol is not contagious. Don't get me wrong. But I think the message is, I was hoping I could get the message across with this case number. And that's like,
it's a can of worms that I was hoping not to open. Or have at 2 minutes to 11. We've been here for 2 hours. You've been amazing, you panelists. The people commenting here have been amazing. To their forbearance and patience and concentration here. So I thank you all. We'll go to Will for a final comment, and it looks like we should do this again. Will, are you still there? Will, have we still got Will? Maybe he's in the comments. I've got, go on, Will. A final comment for you, because I have to say, without your insight, insistence, clarity, persistence, all of those things 12 months ago, I would not have the view I have today. So I thank you for that. A last word to you for the time being, at least on this panel discussion we've had this morning.
Yeah, it's been lovely. I really appreciate it. This is all I really wanted to do all year, was to try and have discussions with people with open minds, who consider themselves certainly independent experts. Because there's been the biggest overarching issue this year has been things like the censorship and the inability to get to good information. And then, of course, the polarization that came with it. Once we get past that and demand transparency and stop all this cancel culture, I would go so far as to say, if we wanted to stop this thing in the next month, we could, but you'd have to start with something. I would argue, if someone said, what would I do? I would say immediately get independent doctors that people are starting to trust, like Dr. Coleman, Dr. Campbell, come into Lower Hill and say, instead of having a secret stage, this for the UK at least, have public groups that are have the ear of the Prime Minister, and they speak in public forum, everyone can see it, and decisions are made for them and from there. Guarantee you those people have the solution. You could just say, right, do this and then it's over. Now Peggy was saying, she doesn't want people to die, and of course, but the focus is entirely become people dying from COVID, and it's like the disaster that's going on, the socioeconomic damage, like Andy was talking about last week, traumatization with the kids losing hope, and again, people not being able to see their families, hug their families, dying alone. It's all terribly, there's a lot more bad things going on than just people dying from COVID. And what I find amazing is the solutions that are at hand. If everyone would take the time to consider them, we'd soon realize that all of that would go away if we adopted an open approach with reasoned debate by science. Now, Andy said something about the money. He said the money, the problem is that the science is corrupted by the money. And Jenny said about how if people realize that they can't trust what's going on with the science, they'll lose faith in the science. But my argument is no, there is sort of science that's corrupted by politics and money. And then you have good doctors, good scientists who, do sort of fight, hold to their Hippocratic oath. They are out there, but they're the ones that have been censored and shut down. So the fight for me is to say, how can you convince everyone to go and consider what good, caring, independent nurses and doctors who have been fighting, give them a chance. And if that was to happen now, if enough people would start arguing, let these people have their say in public, then there is a chance to end this year. And if that doesn't happen, I fear this is going to continue and continue. And nothing will really change in terms of whether people can get back to work, save their businesses, visit their friends and family. I don't see any other way than to have a sort of a completely new, I call it mine Operation V or Plan 5, because the plans that the country aren't getting, and could actually really argue that it's making money.
We're losing you a bit again there, Will. What was the operation called?
I got Operation 5, Operation V.
Operation V. What were those 5 things again? It's a 5-step plan.
Yeah, getting independent doctors into a public forum where people on the television and media can hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
Without it being censored.
Okay.
Then it's take on board their ideas and have these things implemented. For example, once everyone looks into ivermectin and find out how effective it is, there are factories around the world that pump that stuff out, and it can be available in the shops like aspirin.
Yeah.
And with the right, someone else said about the good health information on the television, you have adverts telling people this is what you do, this is how it works, this is what we're going to do it together as much as possible, ready, steady, go.
Yeah.
In countries, as Peggy was saying, it's horrible how many people have died, but in countries, there's 22 countries now have adopted it. It's solved the problem. It pretty much stopped all the deaths. Most of the transmission has gone away. So when countries adopt this other approach, then overnight, all the problems start to be solved.
Well, you'd think we'd look at that, wouldn't you?
That there are 2 explanations for countries with extremely low death that they're starting to skirt around now. One is they don't want to admit it, but it's a large chunk to do with the ivermectin and the vitamin D. And the other one they're starting to discuss now is that maybe people with this cross-reactive if they had common colds last year, in some countries who would have had more last year, those people who still have cross-reactive white cells are able to recognize the virus as soon as it gets in and then fight back and then give the right response to the virus. So I know a lot of people have been traumatized into being terrified of bacteria, virus, but I'm sorry, we cannot live in a sterile bubble world where everything is constantly sanitized. That will lead to it's not a good picture. However, one of the solutions is actually recognizing this, and that we might one day have to, like measles parties, have to deliberately catch a common cold. which will reboost our immune system the way it used to. So we can sort of return back to that state of living with each other in a herd.
So learning to live with these things, with each other, rather than in fear of these things and the horrible consequences of that. Will, thank you so much for your persistence, your commitment over the last 12 months, and for being here today. Thank you, Jenny, for being here today and giving up your normal slot to this lovely panel discussion. Quite amazing. Thank you, and Nadia, for being here today with your erudite insight. And of course, to Peggy, thank you very much, Peggy, for being here today. You have forgiven me, haven't you? I hope. Oh, no, she hasn't. Oh, no.
Not quite yet.
Okay, so and thank you to everybody who contributed today. It's been amazing, and I suspect, you know, what we've modelled here, I think, is part of what Will's talking about. Is an open-minded, open-hearted discussion. We have talked, but we've also listened, and I really, really do appreciate it. I'm proud of you all for that, and I wish you a really beautiful Easter. You know, incredibly the time of death and resurrection. You know, it's no accident in a way to be looking at, you know, what ideas we could let die and what we could allow to rise, you know, to be to such that we can live and love more freely again and safely, obviously. So thank you very much. I did promise you the premiere now of Gary Austin, who's been quiet this morning, but Gary's Tree Zone video, which is shared with you now as a premiere. He's letting us do this. A film he's made that's going to take you into the forest now in a virtual way to decompress. So please enjoy this and have a beautiful Easter, and we'll be back again with you soon. Ciao, ciao. Bye for now, everybody. Feliz Portugal.
Good morning. Good morning from a sunny, if slightly chilly, Alveazra in central Portugal. I've come out this morning to conduct a little experiment, and that's why I brought you guys along. I've always loved nature, and I've always loved being out in nature. I guess it stems really from when I was a kid and living in a busy, sort of tempestuous family, full of all the bluster and arguments and stuff and strife that families have. When I gained my independence as you know, a certain age, I always felt at home in nature, and especially places like forests. For me, they have a certain balancing element that can be quite calming on the soul. So today I'm gonna kind of ask you guys to throw a bit of conventionality away and try and join me on a little experiment to see if you can get what I got, really. So we're going to do a few things. Going to sound a bit crazy, I suppose, but if you're out here on a walk like I am on your own, it really doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. It's up to you. And if it makes you feel good, what's the problem with that? So let's go and do some. I always think it's strange how nature claims things back. And no matter how clever we think we are and what we build and what technology we have, as soon as it's left alone, nature comes back and absorbs things. Which is a great metaphor for life, really, because nature wastes nothing. And I think that is a good place to begin. And a lot of lessons learned there, really. Before I enter a forest, I always like to go through a little ritual to sort of clear my mind and engage with what's around with me. So it's a kind of an act of respect, and what I do is just kind of ask for permission to come in, which sounds a little crazy, but it just gives you that little step to calm, clear, and focus your mind. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stand here, right? Just close my eyes for a couple of seconds, be quiet, and listen for a little sound or something that kind of gives me permission to proceed. Sounds crazy, I know, but it's just my own little way. You're probably going to work your own little way out, so just bear with me just a couple of seconds while I do my thing. Just try and get your breathing down and relaxed, and listen to the sounds that are around you, and decide for that sound that you want is your permission to come in. So in your own thoughts, engage with what's around you, and ask nature for permission to enter it and join it. So here we go. Now, I had my little signal quite early there, but just to show you exactly what I mean, that I thought I'd just do that so you can see. So I've had my little signal, so let's go and just into a little bit of forest here. So I'll see you in a minute. Let's just talk about trees just for just a couple of seconds, right? They're amazing things because they're one of the very few things on this planet that link the air, the earth, water, and the sun. Earth, air, fire, and water. And if you look at one, I mean, they're really just a basic funnel that brings everything together and they connect. And there's the word, they connect. And this is why trees can be quite special things. And if you think of all the things that we get from trees, we get food, we get shelter, building materials, you name it, basically it's there. We even get the oxygen that we breathe. So that kind of puts them in a very important spot in nature to me, and something that demands a lot of respect. And that's what I always try to do with most parts of nature. So what we're going to do, we're going to do the crazy thing, right? We're going to put our hands on the tree and see what we can actually ascertain. And the more you clear your mind to this, the more you will get from it. But each person is different. It just depends how much of that conventional life we can peel away like the skins of an onion. Because we've lost something primeval. We've lost our skills with nature, you know, when we could sense a danger, or we could sense that a type of fruit or something was ripe to eat, or a situation, you know, kind of mattered. So really what we're going to do here, we're just going to try a little experiment, and this is where I really want you to open your mind a little bit. So I'm just going to approach the tree, and once again, just a moment just to connect with everything again, and I kind of ask that tree for permission to touch it, because it's a living thing, like dog, cat, or whatever. So just bear with me. You don't have to do what I do, it's just the way that I do it, so just bear with me a second. Again, get your breathing right. Start to become calm. and in your mind, just fix on something around you that gives you permission to do this, to try and connect. Okay, I've had my permission. Let's just look at a tree, right? The bark, there are things growing on it, moss. At the base of it, we have plants. We've got beautiful little, I don't know whether they're orchids or whether they are some sort of lily of the valley. Some beautiful, beautiful things. But it's all part of a wider world. And it's all down to these things, really. So let's just try. Let's just try the crazy, right? And let's just put your hands on the bark. You're now in contact with the tree. Trees, like everything else, have an energy. You think about your body has an energy. It's an electrical energy that drives this through the cells. Well, trees are no different. And what you're getting here is a sense of that. What you're searching for is a sense of that. Obviously you feel the roughness of the bark and the little textures of the moss that grows on it, and that's opening your senses to what's happening. And feel free to put your hand on a tree and feel the different parts of it. But if you really can connect with the tree, you start to feel other things. So I'll just be quiet for a while and try and get in that zone. So just forgive me for a minute. Each person's different, but you know, some of the senses that you might pick up, you might be surprised to touch a tree sometimes. It's actually warm. Obviously the sun's on this one, but they're not cold inanimate objects. And remember that, especially in spring and summer, all the sap and the energy is moving around the tree, feeding the leaves, feeding the system, being drawn up out of the ground, taking the air in, the rain, the elements. So it's a good metaphor really for nature, and a great representative. As you can see, this one's lost a bit of bark. Who knows, well, that could be anything. But it's another lovely texture. And even just touching this tree now and just sensing that, there's a certain amount of love in this. You know, you're caressing something. And it can be quite relaxing, quite engaging. And in a mad world that we live in, it's a simple pleasure really, just to appreciate and give thanks to such a magnificent life form, which we all take for granted, and I don't think we should. A lot of people do this. Probably multiplies the effect. If not only your hands are bare, but you can do it barefoot, which obviously multiplies the connection to the earth, the electrical flow, etc. It just depends what you're standing on. But that's sufficient. I can sense the tree. I can appreciate it in a way you wouldn't normally appreciate it. You'd look at it, you'd walk past it, and probably be that it. But now there's more. And each tree is different. Each tree has its own character. You will find your own tree that you're drawn to. And it's not crazy. You're re-engaging with something primitive, something primeval. Something deep, maybe within your soul, some people might say. And it's a beautifully relaxing thing. And most of all, it's available to everybody. So try it.